Hi everyone, welcome to the Coolidge Corner Theatre. How's everybody doing tonight? Everybody good? It's great to see all of you. As I mentioned already, this is a completely sold out show here tonight. So yeah, if you could push in from the aisles, if you're saving seats, if you could stop doing that. If you've got your coat on a seat, remove it, because there's still a bunch of folks coming in, but we are gonna start tonight's program because it's a longer film. My name is Mark Anastasio. I'm the Director of Special Programming here at the Coolidge. Stop it. No, knock that off. You're all here tonight for a Science on Screen presentation of Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Everybody's in the right place. I do like asking, is anyone watching the film for the first time tonight? This is nothing to be, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. This film was a success here at the Coolidge when we had it in first run. I think it actually officially entered our top 10 films all time, and if it didn't, I think after tonight it might have. You're padding the stats on this movie for us here this evening, and it received 6 Golden Globe nominations today. It's a very exciting film, and we're stoked tonight to have it for Science on Screen, introduced by Harvard Astrophysicist Dr. Grant Tremblay, I want to thank our sponsors for this film series, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which provides major support for this program and has enabled us to expand it to over 100 independent cinemas nationwide. I want to thank Ruben Anders Scientific, who are matching world-class scientists and leading attorneys throughout the country, and Ellen Hoffman and Ken Loveday, who are Brookline residents. I would also like to thank our series founder, Richard Anders. Our next Science on Screen program is The Fountain, Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain, on January 18th as part of a film program we just announced today called Projections, Science Fiction from the Art House. All right, yeah, okay. But about tonight's speaker, Grant Tremblay is an astrophysicist at the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard and Smithsonian. He was previously a NASA Einstein Fellow at Yale University, a Fellow at the European Southern Observatory, and an astronomer at ESO's Very Large Telescope in Chile. His doctoral thesis work was conducted at the Space Telescope Science Institute, Operations Center of the Hubble Space Telescope, the Johns Hopkins University, and the Rochester Institute of Technology. He currently serves as the head of the Lynx X-ray Observatory Science Support Office at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory and supports flight operations for the Chandra X-ray Observatory as part of the high-resolution camera instrument principal investigator team. As of 2022, Grant is a member of the NASA Astrophysics Advisory Committee, chair of NASA's FISPAG Executive Committee, and vice president of the American Astronomical Society. Dr. Tremblay is the author of 2 books for the general public. The first, Light from the Void, 20 Years of Discovery with NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory, celebrates Chandra's 2 decades of discovery and was published by Smithsonian Books in 2019. The second, What Do Black Holes Eat for Dinner, is a children's book published by Tumble Home Learning in 2020. Dr. Tremblay is also a regular main cast member on the Discovery and Science Channel's award-winning documentary series, How the Universe Works and Space's Deepest Secrets, as well as forthcoming projects from the Smithsonian Channel, the BBC, and PBS Nova. Please give a warm Coolidge welcome to Grant Tremblay.
Well, thank you, Mark. Mark didn't ask me to do this, but it is such an honor to be in this absolutely legendary relic, holy site of cinema history. And I just absolutely love this space. And if you didn't notice, there's an absolutely large construction project happening in back of you right now. So as you all walk out, if you find some holiday spirit in your heart to help this incredible place, just tap your phone against that white donation button or box just on the way you're out. He didn't ask me to do that, but thank you, Mark. It's an honor to be here. So I'm gonna give a weird talk, I'm in a weird mood. I'm not gonna show equations, because the film I don't think calls for that. I can't stay with you because I have 2 kids who have to get to put to bed. So I watched this film for the second time on Saturday night, and it put me again into a bit of an existential crisis. I absolutely love this film, partly because it is both maximalist and completely absurd, and yet completely reconcilable with our entirely modern understanding of inflationary cosmology, right? And that, there is a maximalist interpretation of the so-called many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics and so-called internal inflation, in which we have had this conversation. You have been in this theater an infinite number of times with infinite numbers of variations. Maybe you do have popcorn in one universe, maybe you don't in the other. It's entirely possible. It's not testable, it doesn't make testable predictions, but it is entirely reconcilable with our understanding of how the universe actually works, right? So, the multiverse is having a moment in Hollywood right now. It's a major narrative aspect of like the Marvel movies and, the great films, the Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse, definitely this one. But, the multiverse is something that could absolutely, truly exist and is something both, scary and incredible to think about. So, I'm in a weird mood, right? Because I watched this film, and I was thinking back. I was more than a decade ago, I worked here. This is the Atacama Desert in Chile. This is one of the largest telescopes in the world. It's called the Very Large Telescope. Long story. It's normally very boring, right? But being here connects you to the cosmos so incredibly deeply, right? And that is at night, at twilight, just before we're going to start observing, we'll go up to the telescope platform, and you always watch sunset, and it's in astronomers' tradition, you watch sunset. And the sun will sink below the horizon, and the shadow of the Earth, which you can see that wedge in the corner here, will start to overtake the night sky, right? Night itself is literally a shadow of the Earth, right? And so you feel incredibly connected to the cosmos as the stars start to shine. And that Milky Way on the platform of the Very Large Telescope in Paranal, I swear to you, it's so bright that it almost casts a shadow, right? But I was thinking back to this time because it was around one of these nights that I had a really weird existential crisis, right? And I felt a little bit uncomfortable actually bringing this up because it involves human lives and it's a little bit private and a little bit appropriative of someone else's experience. So I hope you kind of bear with me and kind of forgive me, but it's a truly emotional thing that I felt when I was watching this film and I was reminded of it. And that is that, as you operate these things for over the long winter nights, 13 nights, you make really, really, really dear friends, people who are very close to you. And one of those dear friends, around this time, long story short, we lived in Munich, Germany, but we would travel back and forth all the time to Chile. It's a terrible carbon footprint. I really owe the world a lot. But it was awful in a way. You'd fly from Munich. Usually you'd fly Munich, Paris, Santiago, Antofagasta, then take a 3-hour bus ride into the desert. Sometimes in order to get back, you would fly Antofagasta, Santiago to Rio, Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Rio, Paris. And one of my really dear friends was on a turno, and a turno is a shift at the telescope. And he was gonna go home the next day. He was gonna go back to Munich, and the guy who was gonna come and replace him for the next day was in Santiago at a time, and he was in a bar in Santiago and he got drunk. And that means the next morning he overslept, missed his 5 a.m. taxi to the airport, and the airport, the flight that was gonna fly him to the desert. And that means that my buddy had to stay on one extra night, right? And my buddy had a ticket for Air France 447, the flight from Rio to Paris, which in 2009, very tragic. This is why I'm really uncomfortable bringing it up, because a lot of people lost their lives, and I'm not trying to make light of it, right? But just thinking about that, it didn't even happen to me, but he showed me the electronic ticket in his email for this flight that he missed because he had to stay on an extra night. And it was maybe the first sort of existential crisis of my life, and definitely of his life, right? I just thought very, intently about, if we live in this nested fractal universe where every choice and every possible thing has happened in the past, you think a lot more about the various choices that get you where you are today, right? So these are my two daughters, right? And when you have kids, or when you're a guardian, or when you have, young people you love, your cosmos kind of collapses in on itself, and they become your sort of everything, everywhere, all at once, right? And it really is everything, it's all of the emotions from, the greatest joy when they fall asleep on your shoulder to the greatest rage when they're like Jackson Pollock with yogurt all over my couch. And they are my whole universe right now, right? And they really only exist because 10 years ago, it's a long story, but I had a choice to make this night that I went to this restaurant, and I was either gonna move to Cambridge, Massachusetts, or New Haven, Connecticut, long story, and I was gonna move to Cambridge. I had decided, and I almost didn't go out with my friends because I was really tired this night. I came so close to not going. I'm just gonna go have some pizza at home. But I went. This is a Greek restaurant in Munich, and this guest speaker that we were going out with, he ordered 3 bottles of wine, and we drank all the wine, of course, and he convinced me in this kind of inebriated state, no, you should move to New Haven. And I just got out my iPhone 4 at the time, or whatever it was, and typed out an email to the person that I needed to respond to the next day, and just randomly said, I'll just do New Haven. And that's where I met my wife, and now I have kids, right? And that defined my whole universe. And I almost didn't go to that restaurant, right? And so you think at all fractal levels about the sort of decisions that you make, how you took the road you took to get here tonight, the road you'll take back home, and it puts you into this kind of crisis mode. And this incredible film is a little bit about that. I think ultimately what I love about the film is that it doesn't use the multiverse as a narrative crutch. It rather reframes the multiverse as a way in which, as a way to really uniquely present a film that I think is ultimately about a mother who loves her daughter. I don't want to spoil the film at all, but I just love this film, and I can't wait for you to see it. So I definitely don't have time to talk about all of the various aspects of the multiverse. I did want to briefly touch on them. And so I'm going to flash these on the screen, and I will briefly mention them, but I don't have slides for all of them because we definitely don't have time for that. We want to get to the film. But these are all the things we could talk about, and the two things that I really want you to take away from my talk is that the universe is inconceivably and basically immeasurably vast, meaning it's so impossibly huge, yes, but we also can't actually measure how large it actually is because we are bound by something called the particle horizon, or the event horizon of our cosmos, meaning that is the farthest distance from which we can conceivably retrieve information. The second thing is that time doesn't actually exist, not in the way you think it does. I'll briefly mention that. But I only want you to really know these first two things, really the first three things, and then I'll briefly touch on the last. So, the first two things is that the universe is inconceivably huge, and in a sufficiently large universe, nearly all possible things will probably happen eventually, right? What does that mean? When I was inspired, one of the events in my life that could have easily not happened is that I was a kid growing up in rural Maine. I knew nothing about space. And one night we were watching the news. I don't know, it was like Dan Rather or something. And this event back in 1990, the paper was in 1995, but the event was in 1994. Schumacher-Levy 9, a comet, impacted Jupiter. And I saw the event happen on the news. And I just lit up, right? Because the cosmos prior to that point had been something static and unchanging. It was a bunch of Voyager, pictures in a textbook. It was just something static. And this made the universe feel completely alive and dynamic. So when I was grocery shopping with my mom a couple of months later, I was in the checkout aisle and I saw this on the checkout aisle and I asked her to buy it for me, right? And there's another universe in which she didn't buy it for me, or I didn't see it, and I didn't become an astronomer, but and they're not giving this talk in this universe, right? But in this exact issue, this was a couple years post the Hubble Space Telescope co-star repair, so Hubble didn't work for the first 3 years of its life. In 1993, we repaired it with a Space Shuttle Servicing Mission 1. This image was in there, and I wanted to highlight this image in particular because recently we launched another space telescope you might have heard about, the James Webb Space Telescope, after 20 years of development. And the thing about this image is that blew me away is that in the paragraph under it, it noted that I couldn't sharpen my pencil sharp enough to draw the Earth or even the solar system on this image, right? That there were so many light years from end to end that not even the sharpest pinprick could draw the solar system on here, right? Let alone the Earth, let alone Manhattan or a person, right? Light years upon light years, trillions upon trillions of miles from end to end, right? Well, we just released another image, another version of this image from the James Webb Space Telescope. Here's what it looked like. And I just want to demonstrate how inconceivably vast our universe is. And this is just a really small part of our one single galaxy, right? So here's the James Webb Space Telescope image of this part of the Eagle Nebula called the Pillars of Creation. And I will draw the actual solar system on real scale on this image, right? So this is the orbit of Uranus. So the Earth is the third ring in this image. That's the third planet from the sun in the center. And we'll just start zooming out. So that's the orbit of Neptune, that little dot. So that's about the characteristic size of our solar system, about. It's actually a little bit larger from something called the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud, but it's basically our solar system. So we'll zoom out on the image. But this is just one part of one relatively small star-forming region in our galaxy alone, right? So our solar system on this image is about 1/3 of a pixel. So Earth is about 47 millionths of a pixel on this image, right? And then, I can't even calculate what the size of a person would be on this image. But this is just one part of our galaxy, right? So remember, you can see our galaxy, right? It's not always as bright as this, but this is the disk of our galaxy. What do I mean by the disk? Well, here's an artist's rendition of our galaxy. Of course, we can't take a picture like this of our own galaxy because we don't have an impossibly fast spacecraft to travel outside of it and take a photograph from outside of it in a bird's eye view. But it would look something like this, right? So Earth is here. We're about 26,000 light years from the center of our galaxy. About 30 kiloparsecs, or 100,000 light years in diameter, is our galaxy. Every star you see in the night sky with your naked eye is about this from this sphere. And I didn't draw it on here, but that little nebula you saw is about in the upper right corner of this galaxy, and it's just this tiny, tiny little piece of the galaxy. This is a zoom out of the scale of our known universe. So it'll start with Earth. This is a pretty old animation. There are probably better ones now, but I had this one. They did a great job. It shows every known galaxy as a little green dot. And so, unfortunately, it doesn't render all of those galaxies, of course, but just know that as you zoom out, those little green dots that you see are each swirling kingdoms of hundreds of billions of stars and even more planets, right? There are more planets than stars in the universe, right? So in each of those little green dots is hundreds of billions of stars and hundreds more of billions of planets. We haven't even started zooming out yet. Why am I showing you, trying to show the scale of the universe? It's because in a universe that is nearly infinite or just sufficiently large, it is possible that every finite possibility happens eventually, and in the maximalist interpretation, in a truly infinite universe, every finite possibility will happen an infinite number of times. So this is the sort of level 1 multiverse. You don't need to invoke any sort of quantum foam or bubbles or decoupled hypersurfaces in inflationary cosmology. The level 1 multiverse just states if the universe is big enough, any sufficiently large universe will basically encompass the realm of all possible things, right? All possible things will happen eventually. So when you see someone with hot dog fingers in this film, spoiler alert, it seems absurd, but it's not that absurd, right? And one of the things I love about this film, so we're zooming out now, right? So here's our galaxy alone. Now all of these green dots are real, true real galaxies with real positions, hundreds of billions of stars in each of them. You'll see an hourglass shape that's not actually the shape of our universe. It's because the dust in the disk of our galaxy prevents mapping galaxies from there. So just think of it as a sort of homogeneous, clumpy sphere of galaxies. Yeah, but this is our entire known universe. And the idea is that the universe is just incomprehensibly vast. And we are bounded by a surface that's called a particle horizon that we can't actually see to. The farthest thing we can see is this outer shell, which is called the cosmic microwave background, which I don't have time to get into. But basically that beyond this particle horizon, there could be an infinite number of universes or simply, an infinity of galaxies. And if that's the case, then the multiverse just naturally occurs. Yeah. The last thing, I'm rambling, so the last thing I want to tell you before I just briefly flash through those last things, one thing that you should know is that you have never witnessed the present in your entire life, right? Time does not exist in the way you think it does, right? This is because the speed of light is finite, so by definition, you are always looking into the past, right? So you are about 10 feet away from me right now. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second, right? It is not infinitely fast. It is extremely fast, but it's not infinitely fast. 186,000 miles per second is about 1 foot per nanosecond, or 1 billionth of a second. So you're 10 feet away from me right now. You are about you are seeing me as I were, not right now, but as I was 10 nanoseconds in the past, right? You are maybe, I don't know, I'm bad at this, about 100 feet away from me, way at the back, right? So you're seeing me further back in time than she is, right? You're seeing me about 100 nanoseconds in the past. She's seeing me about 10 nanoseconds in the past. If you kept going further and further away, you'd see me further and further back in time. At some point, if you went far beyond the bounds of the earth, you would see me before I started speaking, right? If you went as far as the sun is away from the earth, you would see me about 8 minutes ago, right? The sun is 8 light minutes away from the earth. So you've never seen the sun as it is right now in your entire life. You've always seen it as it is 8 minutes in the past, right? We got data yesterday from the Hubble Space Telescope. My students working on it were really excited. That galaxy is about 100 million light years away in terms of light travel time. And that means that the photons that we collected in the mirror of the Hubble Space Telescope began their journey to the telescope literally when dinosaurs were roaming the Earth, like quite literally, right? And on you go, the further back you go. That means that time travel is natural. You're always looking back into the past, right? Because of that, a lot of crazy things really happen. For example, fundamentally, there's no arrow of time, right? Deep down in the fundamental laws of nature, there is no actual difference between the past and the future. There's no actual arrow of time. The only arrow of time is provided by something called entropy, which is a fancy way of saying that there are many more ways to be disordered than there are ordered, right? A car engine could be, the parts of a car engine could be arranged in untold trillions of configurations where it's not a working car engine, but really kind of just one or maybe a couple where it's a working car engine, right? A lot of crazy things happen in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, for example. Quantum mechanics suffers from something called the measurement problem. Basically, quantum mechanics states that everything is basically Schrodinger's equation. Schrodinger's equation it encounters what's called a measurement problem, and the way it solves that, and the way that we think the universe really works, is that an observation is something called Schrodinger's cat. There's a box, and there's a cat in the box, and it's either dead or alive. And in quantum mechanics, the cat is literally dead and alive at the same time, and that an observation, for example, an electron spinning this way versus an electron spinning the other way, is nothing more than a random selection of a distribution of possible measurements or observations, right? So the idea is that in quantum mechanics, it's not that the universe decided that the electron was spinning this way. It was spinning in all possible states, and you just happened to observe it in this possible state, but it doesn't mean that the unobserved possible states aren't any less real. So in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, literally every particle of your body is an expanding fractal branch, an infinite tree of all possible events and states and choices, and that is fractal at all levels. So that means you've made every choice in every possible scenario an infinite number of ways. The multiverse is a natural consequence of our best understanding of inflationary cosmology. That's another way of saying that in our current best understanding of how the universe expands, there's an epoch called inflation in which the universe doubles in size at least 80 times over, right? It's an incredibly rapid, incredibly dramatic event in the universe to solve three things called the horizon problem, the monopole problem, and the flatness problem. And in the inflationary cosmology, the way we best understand it right now, the inflating universe will create an infinite number of collapsing fractal universes that are causally disconnected from one another. And so our universe is in fact not just one universe, one lone universe. It's like one bubble in an infinite foam of beer or whatever, a big bubble bath of infinite bubbles that are all causally disconnected from one another. It sounds crazy, but in this film, it kind of invokes this bubbly multiverse nature where you have infinite universes, and it's incredible, and all of it is totally reconcilable with reality. So when you watch this film, you remember the Matrix films? In order to get pulled out of the Matrix, and I promise I'll wrap up. In order to get pulled out of the Matrix, they have to run to a phone booth. My favorite part of this film, or one of them, is that the equivalent of that in this universe, so there's a universe that's mounting all these incursions or missions into other universes for a reason that you'll discover. Instead of running to a phone booth to get identified and get pulled out or identified within this infinite nest of universes, they'll have the person that they want to find do something completely absurd, like eat chapstick and put shoes on the wrong side of their feet, because out of the infinite universes, that event only happened in 8,000 universes, and then so you've really narrowed your search area down. And so I just love that as a framing device to allow these completely ridiculous, absurd things to happen. And yet, this film just manages to just be completely incredible. And then the last thing is you'll see two rocks having a conversation. That is a reference to the anthropic principle, wherein basically it boils down to if there are infinite universes, which there very well could be, there may be untold trillions of universes in which the conditions aren't right for life to exist. And the only reason we happen to find ourselves in this beautiful, finely tuned universe where life flourishes, at least on our tiny planet, is that if we lived in a universe that did not favor the conditions of life, well, such a universe would go unbeheld. That's called the anthropic principle. And that would be directly referenced in the film. I'm going to shut up, let you enjoy the film, and thank you all very much.